Hello and welcome to the Gambling Files podcast, the podcast that's flying solo, enjoying what you might call a menage a une. Well, kind of. It's not actually just me. It's just that there's no Fintan, which I know will come as a surprise to some of our regular listeners because it's usually August where he disappears for the entire month. So let's wait and see if he does that as well. But he's taking some hard-earned holiday time. And I'm pretty sure he won't be listening to this, so I might occasionally take the piss a bit too. I do need to read out some messages from our sponsors because we take our sponsors very seriously. And their benevolence makes it possible for us to do this, to create this quality content, 3 podcasts a week. It's madness. And they are, in no particular order, Optimove, who are the creators of positionless marketing. Now, Fintan and me, we had the product demo. It was a little while ago now, but at the end of the demo, we were both like, whoa. Like, genuinely. Because the thing about this is, it's not a Premier League approach to sponsors. It's not like, has the check cleared? Brilliant, you've passed the fit and proper persons test. We like to work with people where we can recommend stuff without feeling like we've screwed somebody over. So what we say when we read out our Optimove stuff is, go and get the demo because it's fantastic. It's really excellent. And, you know, if you say that you've come through us, they'll give you 1 month free, I believe. So that's good for us. It's good for them. Everybody wins. Everybody. So that's Optimove. We're also sponsored by the benevolent gods of World Gaming, or the artist formerly known as Clarion Gaming, organisers of IGB Live, which has just happened, which Fintan told me was very good. And, of course, ICE, which we're now all planning towards. Well, I'll sort of plan towards it in a few months, probably. But they're wonderful at what they do. They create great events, and they do it really, really well. And it's weird to say this, but they seem to be getting better at it. It's kind of weird. I mean, if I were them, I'd probably be getting lazy. I'd be getting complacent. But they're not. ICE just seems to get better and better. Yeah. And finally, last but not least, Gaming Laboratories International, aka GLI. And you know, today's episode is brought to you by Gaming Laboratories International. And GLI is a world-class testing, inspections, and certification company committed to delivering the highest quality land-based, lottery, and iGaming testing and assessment services around the world. GLI provides suppliers, operators, and regulators with expert guidance for navigating the future of gaming and ensuring gaming innovations meet regulatory standards with confidence in more than 710 jurisdictions. 710. For more information, visit gaminglabs.com. And for information on any of our sponsors and links, you can look in the show notes. That's the grown-up stuff done. We can now take the piss out of Fintan. Although I said it's not a menage a une today because I have a guest. Possibly, I mean, I don't know, could we call you a controversial guest?
Depends. Maybe judge us in an hour. Outspoken, forthright, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. But I mean, I think historically, your paymasters might have been regarded as controversial.
I think that everything is down to perception in this world, and I think when I joined a year ago, just over a year ago, I said it was the end of the never complain, never explain era for my paymasters, as you mentioned in 1XCARE. And I think over the last year, there's been a protracted change in engagement and a wish to address, I would say challenge, but I think to challenge, that would mean everyone would like to engage with you. And I've found that not everyone does want to engage because it doesn't help them write misleading headlines or clickbait, as the younger generation call them. So I think there's been a protracted, I don't want to say roadmap, but a protracted effort for myself over the last year to at least present the other side of the story and not just have one-way traffic. zooming at 100 miles an hour towards us.
It's pretty fair. I haven't said your name yet, or your job title, or really, I
Well, I
haven't
think
mentioned who you
you
work
call
for.
me controversial, so and actually I thought you were referring to me, not my paymaster. So that really says something about my ego, maybe.
Well, no, I could say you both, maybe controversial is maybe not the right word, but it's all I've got right now. It's very hot here. My
We'll go
brain,
with it.
it's not working. So, so we're joined by Simon Westbury. Simon just mentioned 1XBet, who were all over um, um, advertising, sponsorships, all kinds of things. You'd see the name absolutely everywhere. Sponsored PSG. Do they still sponsor PSG?
Yeah, we're partner with PSG in Africa. We partner with FC Barcelona, partner with FIBA, the basketball, partner with World Volleyball. I could be here all day giving you our list of partnerships, but I
But
think
you
they're
see what
the
I'm saying, and I think it might be able to say that a lot of your business historically back in the day was maybe leaning towards less regulated territory, shall we say?
I think I challenge that to a point and actually say if you look at the evolution of regulation, one expert has evolved with it, as the industry has, and there has been an acceleration, certainly post 2020, to get local licenses where it makes commercial viable sense for us to do so. There are some markets that we haven't entered because the regulatory environment isn't something we believe we can be profitable in, and I think there's some misperceptions about past licenses that we've held, which I've addressed with in interviews with some of your sponsors. And give your sponsors a plug here, iGaming Business, which is obviously part of Clarion and World Gaming. Um, so I've addressed on that on a number of occasions, and we can talk about that as needed. But I think if you go back 10, 15 years, most people weren't operating in dot country, for
Hey,
example, and we've
Fintan,
evolved.
Fintan likes to say there is not a business in this industry that hasn't had its hands dirty at some point in some territory or other.
I think that's fair, and I think actually sometimes a lot of the regulations, etc., aren't that clear. So, as an industry, and I've said this many times, and I'm not talking about 1X here, I'm talking about as an industry, we're very good at pushing the envelope and then throwing up our hands aghast when we're found to have maybe pushed that envelope too far.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about the industry too.
It's always interesting, but I think I can't remember about 6, 7 months ago when the UKGC caught someone not filing something correctly because they were using different colour type font or something. Can't remember the precise details, but yeah.
Good times. One
Mm,
day we'll look back at that and we'll go, oh, those are the good old days.
I do that quite often now, unfortunately, going back to the good old days of 19 years ago when it seemed to be a lot more fluid, let's say.
That makes you sound really old, though.
Yeah, I'm wearing glasses now. I kind of feel that I can say that I'm getting
Yeah, but I'm wearing that. I am quite old. So,
old. It was, it was just when the optician said about just nearly a year ago, it's time for glasses because I couldn't read the, was it, stain remover guidance because I managed to miswash and dye some towels that I shouldn't have, and I was trying to pretend to my wife I knew what I was doing.
that's quite embarrassing.
Yeah, it was.
Still, it's all come out okay. So the thing we want to talk about today, the reason that you're here is you are the chair of 1XCARE, right?
Hmm.
We're going to come back to some of the stuff that we were talking about a minute ago.
Hmm.
In fact, no, we won't. We'll start with the stuff we were just talking about because it segues nicely into the existence of 1XCARE, right? Because I think you touched on something a minute ago about perception
Hmm.
and suggested that perhaps the 1XBet brand is misperceived. And Do you think that you were talking about things that you've done in the past 12 months? So you came on board there like a year or so ago.
Hmm.
Do you think like a lot of what you've been doing is first and foremost just tackling that misperception?
I think I kind of all this stuff that has to start internally, and actually misperception, conception, whatever. If 1X as an organisation wasn't prepared to address that or engage with that, then that misperception would have continued. So without trying to make it all about us, we developed. And my interview process was long for that reason because I wanted to understand that there was a commitment from 1X to actually go along this path properly, and that's just my normal suspicious behaviour. That's nothing to do with 1X. And we kind of formulated this plan based on three key pillars. One, for face, we call it regulatory rigor, but let's just say it's a commitment to gain as many licenses in the jurisdictions that make commercial sense to us. The second was really about empowering the people, my colleagues internally, and ensuring that they were empowered and their voices were heard internally. And then third, which I think you may have alluded to earlier as well, also to make sure all the partnerships that we engage with are meeting our strictest standards, and we put new standards in place because some of the past challenges haven't necessarily been relating to 1X, but as I call the mothership, it was some of our partners that got us into trouble under our brand association. So I think there had to be those three key pillars of commitment. And I think talking about IGB last week, which I thought was very well put together by Clarion as they always do, and I think it was a very good event. You know, 1XBet stand, I would argue, and I maybe say that is because I work with them, is was the busiest. It wasn't just the most pronounced; it was the busiest stand. So I've also learned over the last year, whatever headlines are written or people say, the industry wants to work with us and engage with us, and I think that was one of the most interesting things I found first joining is my LinkedIn inbox lit up, my phone lit up, just because a lot of people had wanted to work with 1XBet and they didn't know how and didn't know how to get access to the organisation. And I'm not saying that I'm some hero in doing that, but as we mentioned earlier, I've been around in this industry a while. If that makes me old, that makes me old. And I kind of became a conduit to allow for business to evolve for both 1XBet and people that want to work with us. And I always have these slightly, I don't want to say strange, slightly enlightening moments at conferences where I follow the process of internal introductions and the deal's done and I may not be aware of it and people come and thank me and say, oh, thank you, we're now integrating, that's brilliant news. And I'm like, yeah, I just put 1+1 and it's 2 and I'm glad you're doing business. But I think there was a commitment to change around those three pillars when I joined. And then as with everything, you take the bull by the horns and you enjoy the ride and you stay on for as long as you can. And in many ways, a lot of lessons were learned over the last year in how we deliver that message and how we deliver who we are. You know, obviously, as you mentioned, we're a global company. We've got over 18 years of experience as an organization, but we've also got lots of local experience with 35 plus licenses now. So the strategic growth has been always around product robustness combined with digital acquisition marketing tools and, you know, those sponsorships and partnerships where available. But one aspect I was also heavily involved in over the last year is the player protection reports that we've done and the indexes, the Western European report, the African report, and the Latin American report. Because actually, you know, when you go to these shows, John, there's always a little nugget of information. I was doing one interview talking about player protection, and I won't name the journalist or the organisation, but one of the largest betting organisations, operators in the world, had said to this journalist, "We never talk about player protection because we believe our systems are very robust, and if you talk about it, you shine a light on it, and that can be a problem." And I think that was quite telling.
Yeah, it's a very polite way to put it.
I try and be on best behaviour at the moment.
To use a local phrase, that kind of talk makes my shit itch.
Yeah, I mean, I'd put it slightly differently. I think there's been, and the report showed this, there's a clear indication from the industry around performative compliance, around player protection, safer gambling, and ticking boxes. But at the same time, how does that transpire into actual genuine initiatives around this area? And I think that's where 1XCARE comes in, and I'm not just trying to push that in now. I think even at IGB, the safer gambling zone or the player protection zone, what they were calling it escapes me, forgive me. You know, they're not the most prominent features amongst all the glitzy stands that cost millions to build.
To be fair, at ICE this year,
Mm,
they developed the area quite nice. It was a big improvement. It wasn't just tucked away in a corner or whatever. It was in a thoroughfare. There was a stage. There was a really clever way that they did the presentations. Yeah, there was a lot to love there. But generally,
hmm
it's box ticking. It's let's get those companies in because they'll pay, etc.
Yeah, and I think that I'm not having a go at the conference organisers here. I think it's an industry thing that actually, what are people overly interested in attending these events? And I think this is, there's slot providers, there's platforms, and there's some platforms in Brazil. I was speaking to them at events, going, "Why are you here?" All the licenses have been given for Brazil. Everyone who's going to operate in the market either has chosen their platform or has their own platform. So you're trying to sell a platform to a market that's moved on. We're trying to sell to local aggregators, was the answer I got. And I'm like, operators, when they choose their platform, it's their biggest strategic decision. If you're still trying to sell a platform a year after the market's gone live, and then you turn around and I hear this one, oh, it wasn't a very good show because people aren't there. No, we are there. As operators, we just don't need to talk to you about your product, and it's not our fault. You spent a lot of money building a big shiny stand. But I think all the organisers are now moving to give the player protection zones or hubs greater prominence, and I think that's because many of the shows are expanding as well. So the space, although at a premium, it does allow them to have some flexibility to showcase this area a little bit more.
One of the things that annoys me, there's a lot of great people doing great work on research, on player protection, etc., etc. And I was at the UNLV conference on risk and gambling end of May, right? It was terrific. Really, really enjoyed the event and met some wonderful people and recorded some podcasts there. So we have another podcast which is about addiction and about addiction holistically, not just gambling, but it's about research. It's for nerds. It's like for people that are up to their necks in that part of the industry. What's the research? Who's doing it? What's it about? Amongst other things. Anyway, so we were there for that, myself and Dr. Michael Auer, who's my co-host on that podcast. And it was fascinating because it was great to be at an event that put the academic side of it, that put the research side of it, the presentation side of it front and center.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason for its existence. And they have some great sponsors and blah, blah, blah. But they know who their target audience is. And like you see, I'm not going to name names here because I've already pissed enough people off. Mind you, is it really going to matter if I piss a few more off? But there's one prominent event and publishing business in the industry hosted an RG type summit thing, and in that same week they published on an orphan directory on their site an article guiding players towards the best offshore operators in Norway. Now, that's just hypocrisy. That's somebody who's just in it for the money and doesn't give the slightest of fucks about the event they've put on. But it makes everybody attending that event look like a dick, in my opinion.
I think I can't work. Well, I probably could work it out if I thought about it long enough. I mean, I think that again, I'm not going to name names. I wasn't at that event, and I've got a question I'd like to ask you if I'm allowed. And I know it's meant to be you asking me the questions, but
Dude, bring
I
it.
think that the amount of times I've gone on LinkedIn and seen media sections of this industry promoting some research which is obviously paid for by an organisation into certain jurisdictions, and they're my friends, and and I've been lucky enough that I get on with all. I don't want to sound like the BBC, with all the event organisers. I've probably seen most of them do it. And it's just like, guys, like it's very clear that you've been paid to promote this piece, and it really goes against some of what you're saying. But on the research part, and I think we can discuss this in a little bit, I've always found, and I wasn't at this conference unfortunately, that when we look into the research, and 1XCARE, although there's the support, there's four pillars, and one of them being the support and well-being pillar, which is looking at giving grants and partnerships for counselling and community programs for people, directly affected or addicted to gambling. When I've looked at the research, and this may be just on a very high level, it's quite paradoxical. There's other people, and I don't want to say for gambling, but that are from the industry and understand gambling. And then there's the people that are just intrinsically against it, and anything that they are going to write or produce is heavily biased towards that aspect. And I think maybe comparing it to politics as left and right, the centre ground is where common sense should be.
The conversation is generally, as you say, it's polarized.
That's the word I
But
was looking for.
but there are loads of people with lived experience of gambling addiction who are not anti-gambling. Loads of them, and they get shouted down by people who may also have lived experience, but who are anti-gambling because they shout the loudest. But the polar sides of that conversation, nothing gets done when we're just shouting at each other. Like you
Yeah,
say,
that's what I'm
it
trying to
gets
say. If
done
you're
in the
left and
middle.
right, you're never going to
No,
agree
you're
in
dead right.
politics.
Dead right.
I think that is a really interesting aspect to me. We only launched a week ago, but I've been encouraged by the amount of organisations and people that have already reached out to me to understand how we can work together and the funding process that we have. Because again, maybe jumping around a little bit here, 1XCARE is an NGO. It is dedicated around player protection and responsible gambling, and it's structured, as I mentioned, around the four-pillar hub, let's say. One being research hub, two being educare, three being tech shield, and four being support and well-being, as I mentioned. And we're looking to implement regional initiatives through the global structure and presence that we have. While I think what we learned from the regional reports, and again, I'm sure you won't. It's not going to raise any eyebrows with you that the world is not monolithic, and there's different actions needed in different parts of the world. Like the research in Africa was very clear that the biggest challenge really in Africa around gambling is actually ensuring that people don't view gambling as income generation. Now, that's a starting point. When you look at Western Europe, there just seemed to be massive confusion because there was a lack of consistency, clarity, and communication between operators and regulators. And Latin America, although facing some challenges around people viewing gambling as income generation, there was a very high level of adoption of use of technology in player protection and safer gambling. Maybe that's because the regulation is slightly newer there and not as entrenched. So I think the local aspect of what we want to do is very important as well, and not just saying with this, because I think you can get lost if you just say you're global. Well, what does that actually mean? Yes, we are a global company. We are an NGO associated, separately with our own advisory board and our own statutes of incorporation, etc., which I'm lucky enough to chair. Sorry, but we're going to be judged on what we deliver as 1XCARE. So I think it's a very interesting time to do this because I think that, as you mentioned, there is a shift in the industry, but we as an industry do need to get way beyond the performative compliance levels that we are at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to, it's not really a question, Actually, didn't you just say you had a question for me a minute ago?
I did, and it's escaped me because I've been so busy talking. Oh no, the question was about the research, and actually, is there a middle ground in it? Because I found everything to be very polarized. So maybe I made it more of a statement than a question. But
Well, no, but by its nature, a lot of research is looking at extremes.
mhm,
But there's like some of the guys that I spoke to in Vegas. Like there's a guy, Shane Krause, who's going to be coming on addiction quite soon.
mhm,
He's researching gambling addiction in serving armed forces people and in veterans, and that's
mhm.
really fascinating. An awful lot of research. They're discovering a lot of commonality in eating disorders.
Yeah, but this is what we've high level hypothesis. We kind of had the same thing, and actually, some of the research that we're prepared to get involved in terms of academic studies and open reporting doesn't want to just make it about gambling. Is there links to other kind of addictions, and is there things that we can learn?
Well, that's the point of the whole addiction podcast,
Mm,
because there are generally quite significant commonalities between addictions.
mhm,
In some, it might be the existence of dopamine. The dopamine trigger might be a key factor, and obviously, frequency is a huge factor in gambling addiction.
I think dopamine is, and I saw something before I came on this morning, just as I was flicking through LinkedIn, about people chasing the loss, not the win. And I think dopamines are key and frequency, as you say. And honestly, I'm not just saying this because obviously you're recording it and you could use this as evidence. If there's people that you think we can work with or we can become involved with, and I think some of this is, the minute you start talking to me about armed forces and veterans, those who've served their country, it becomes a motive as well. We will have a budget, but I'm prepared to engage and listen to as many people as I can that think that 1XCare will be able to benefit within those four pillars that we've discussed.
There is some genuinely fabulous research going on, um, and be happy to introduce you to people. Very very happy. Because the thing about academics wanting to do research is there are generally two obstacles: funding and data.
Hmm.
And I think if something that you can do helps them to get around at least one of those, then you will find some really happy partners to work with. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
the loss
again,
thing,
I didn't do
chasing the
my
losses.
PhD because I couldn't get the funding. So, again, on a personal level, I understand the funding aspect for sure.
What was your degree in?
My degree was in politics. My MA was in Middle East politics,
Wow,
and my PhD was going to be about the Barcelona process and the democratization of the Arab Middle East, the Maghreb, and the Mashreq.
awesome. I mean, I'm
Yeah, I
kind
didn't
of
get the
glad you
money.
didn't get to do it, but
It was very funny when the Arab Spring happened because we were predicting that as part of my master's research, and everyone was not giving me money because they didn't think I was talking any sense.
yeah, it's pretty annoying actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit like I could have been one of those annoying people on the BBC as an expert academic with a stained shirt. But no, life works in mysterious ways.
Mate of mine's one of those experts you get on the BBC. We were at school together, but his thing is he's an expert on Doctor Who.
Yeah, but that I'm sure he gets at least 1 gig a year on the BBC out of that.
Oh, at least. Not to mention regional stuff, because they
Was
found
it like
some missing episodes recently.
Oh no, I mean, I think people do that on purpose, but that's a cynic in me. I
Well,
think
no,
that's
the way that
ridiculous.
they used to do TV, most of it was broadcast live. Hardly anything was
Mm.
was broadcast recorded, and they didn't record what they were broadcasting live. And if they did, it usually got recorded over it. And they found like 3 episodes that was thought were gone forever. Some technician had taken a recording home or whatever. But what Toby did, this is so cool. Peter Purvis.
Mm.
He
Not
was the
overly.
Green Cross Code Man when we were kids,
Oh, okay, that shows how much attention I played at school.
and he was the the body of Darth Vader.
Okay, more interesting.
Um, well, he Purvis was in. I'm pretty sure it's Peter Purvis. He was in the episodes, and Toby did this thing. They got a local film crew to cover it, but they lured him to a cinema, thinking that he was going to watch something that he'd been involved with, and then showed him these lost episodes. Beautiful, great bit of television. But anyway, I digress.
That comes down to budget as well. But I think it was 20 years ago since that guy appeared. We went to the job interview not long ago at BBC and ended up on TV as an expert on something wrong.
That was fabulous. That really
Fair
was
play to the
beautiful.
fella though, for like trying to style it out. I mean, brilliant.
He did actually do pretty well considering, because it was something really niche as well, wasn't it? It was like he was supposed to be a friggin' general or something.
I don't know. It was
Um,
funny.
I think that researching things like dressing up losses as wins and how losses are presented. There's some really fascinating stuff that is either it's been done a little bit or you know what I mean. But if an operator's involved in that kind of research, then you get totally different data.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing I have to stress is, one. I mean, you can't say there's a 1XCARE, 1XBet. There's not any kind of correspondence with it. It's clear in the name, but we are a separate legal entity as 1XCare with a separate advisory board, and obviously funds will come from 1XBet, and 1XCare is a non-profit, and all budgets, etc., will be included in the 1XCare annual report. So people like you can really scrutinise what I'm doing and ring me up in a year and said, you were going to give money to this research and you didn't. Um, but it's all going to be as open and as transparent as it can be. But also part of this is about education for us as an industry, and that's not that we want to be preaching. We want to look and maybe leave egos at the door to work with other operators to look at athletes as well as the public, because very. I've seen was it on the BBC. There was a program about those footballers who the 30 or whatever they're called that got into those film uh, production things, and they all lost a load of money. A very good friend of mine was involved in it, losing money, not in the scam. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I remember the story. It was
Danny
it was a
Murphy's on
friggin'
it and
awful
stuff.
story. Yeah,
Yeah, and actually, when you've got these young players coming into the game, there does need to be some education around money, etc. And a sport I love is in cricket has been very heavily impacted about integrity and data, etc. in the past. So there's lots that we've done, and I think going back to how we started this conversation, it took a year for this to grow organically because I didn't. It wasn't on the roadmap when I joined, put it that way, and it just grew organically from the reports and what I thought we could do, and then obviously we have to build the team to to do that, and the advisory board's just being formed. That I've got Chris Bird, who was ex very senior at Man City, so that brings the sports aspect in. We've got Clino Mancini, who's obviously one of the top lawyers in this space and worked with regulators. And we've got Cecile Wissenhandler, who was at Alwyn and Play and Go. And actually, those two are really key because when you get involved with regulators, and I stick up for regulators very often because they actually get given the laws to apply and they have to work out how to apply them. And I think sometimes, and this isn't pointing fingers at anyone who works within regulation or regulatory bodies, when you see, and I use this as a safe example, head of black markets at the UKGC being offered 65k a year to tackle a massive problem. is that really going to attract the top talent? So I think actually I have a lot of sympathy for regulators, but it is a very different universe and one not that I've overly been involved in. So I know Corina and Giselle will have great connections and ability to engage on that level, and Chris, with his sports background at Man City, will also be able to engage massively as well. And we will be looking to add some other members to it, and probably two more to make it five, and maybe looking to add people from outside of the industry because
I am available.
we can't afford you, John.
You almost certainly can. I am not expensive. Ask anybody. Okay. Often when operators or suppliers or anybody says they're going to do this big grand idea like this, it's bollocks.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that with the greatest respect. I say it with all due respect.
I'm trying to think of a slightly less aggressive phase. I think wallpapering, as I would say, when other people do it, it's kind of
Yeah, no,
window dressing,
I'm going to
maybe.
stick with bollocks.
I'm going to go with window dressing.
They're not, their actions are not showing that they care what goes on. They're, and I find that frustrating because it would take less energy to just not do it.
Look, I think this comes back to a very good point that you made about at the start, the perception. This, as an industry, we've made the announcement. You picked it up straight away, which I appreciate, John. With the association through the name of 1XBet and 1XCARE and my name attached to it, and that's not me trying to blow my own trumpet. There's no way the industry or the wider media is going to let us get away with not delivering. Now, people may have an opinion on have we delivered enough, but you can't make the noise that we've made, and I can't put my name to something without at least giving it my best endeavours to deliver. Will I be successful? Hopefully. Will I fail? I don't know. But I know I will be judged on the output, be that the number of and quality, not just number, of independent researches that are published, the adoption of educare training programs that we fund or we're involved in, the deployment of technology tools that come from research or again that we're involved in, as well as grants awarded and beneficiaries supported through our programs. And also that comes down to engagement. And I think I'm here, I've been here for the last year, well, I've been here through my whole career to speak to people, but especially over the last year, that's intensified. And I think there's two very big names in the industry committed to this, with 1XCARE as the baby we've created. There's an industry, there's an image for you. 1XBet and Simon Westbury create a baby in 1XCARE. That I just think, yeah, I understand your point, but if we don't deliver, then this won't. It's not going to be the old fish and chip paper in the morning if we don't deliver.
Yeah. Coming out and announcing it as publicly as you did, and yeah, it's immediate accountability, and very often when initiatives not like this necessarily, but when initiatives that are about PG or whatever, there's no transparency in the process, and so that limits the accountability. And that's quite a big issue. With no transparency, you can, we did a thing. Yeah, we did a thing and it was really successful. As opposed to, here's what we did. Here's the accounts. Here's what we did with the money. Here's what we're hoping to do next year. Do you know what I mean? That kind of transparency, it does bring greater pressure. It does bring much greater accountability. But it also means that what you're doing should have greater gravity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not doing this. Gravity's a lovely word, and one of the questions I got asked a lot of last week was, personally, like, how proud of you to be involved in this? I think I'm proud when I deliver. It's been a journey to this point, and we'll be judged. And as I mentioned earlier, detailed financial information and program budget will be included in all annual reports. But what I've also learned over the last year, and actually I think that's over the last 6 months been the biggest change, not everyone's prepared to change their understanding or perception. So actually, after year one, when all budgets, etc., are produced, there's going to be some people that use that as a stick to beat me with, or 1XCARE with, or 1XBet with you. You just have to accept that because there's people who have their own agendas and they're not prepared to change or engage.
Plus, some people are tossers.
Again, I'm probably being a bit more diplomatic these days. I mean, not everyone's going to get on with everyone always, and I understand we all have a living to make. But sometimes when I see there's this guy on LinkedIn at the moment, I've worked out the 1XBet funnel or the latest biggest operators funnel. Someone sent me the report. It's just a link of a load of links off the web, but he's getting 500-600 likes and 300 comments, and I'm like, that's 300 people very disappointed who downloaded your report because it's total nonsense.
You can be diplomatic if you like, but I'll probably always tell it like it is. I was having a conversation with a friend while I was in Vegas. I was having lunch, and he basically said the reason that I'll never be able to thrive or even exist within a corporate structure is that I can't let my principles go. I just can't keep quiet.
It's an interesting one because actually I've had challenges again along my career maybe because I've very principled and I believe in what I believe in, etc. And you could look at some of the companies I've worked for before this last year and think really. But the fact is, there is a way around it, and I'm actually working on it myself. And I'm not trying to be like some epiphany I had a moment of. But your use of language is always very important. But someone told me the other day is, Simon, you're so forthright and believing in what you see because you see things very quickly. You start with conclusions. You always say, right, this is it. Try explaining to people who aren't like you the context and the considerations of how you came to that conclusion, and there's a chance that you may bring them along. So I think when we talk about principled peoples, and this is the image in my head, they're firebrands and they're very direct, and it's this way and this way and this way. But actually, I'm working on it. We'll speak again in a year or so and see if it works or not. But I think actually it was a very telling moment for me for someone to tell me that you start with conclusions, look at context and consideration.
That's interesting. I'm not sure whether I do the same, but I do. I arrive where I'm going quickly.
Yeah.
But then I think about
Which is a skill.
When I start an article, this is unusual. When I start an article, I always begin with a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite often an article begins with an answer that somebody wants to get to, and I do it the opposite way. I start with a question, and then I talk to as many people as I can get hold of to come to the actual answer, not one that I have sat down with already.
Yeah, and I think there was people at university started writing their essays with their conclusions, and I may have had a plan of where it might go, but I did never want it to be so predefined as to write the conclusion at the beginning.
Yeah, it's kind of boring as well. I'm up for having
I
my
just
mind
think you're
changed.
pigeonholed, and I think the best thing about the career, and even with joining 1XBet last year, is I didn't know where it would go, and we've come to this big announcement, and a year later. If I was predefining, going right, this is where I want to be in a year, then you just work towards that, and you miss out on other opportunities.
It's true. So those 4 pillars, if I remember correctly. Research,
Hmm.
Educare.
Education, just called it education
Yeah,
program.
because Educare just sounds like a bit silly. Tech Shield.
That's the use and deployment of technology within player protection for the industry. And actually, I think this falls outside of technology, but it's something that's come to me over the last couple of weeks. As an industry, we need to put player protection or safer gambling at the heart of everything that we do from conception to delivery. And I mean that in every product. You know, when people build slots or whatever they build, yeah, they'll make sure it can hit the performative compliance of, oh, this spin time or this, you know, but actually, the reality of this, and it was quite, when you read it in one of the reports, it was quite obvious actually. If you build a long term relationship with the player that's sustainable, that's best for everyone. I think,
Yeah, no, totally.
funny
The
that.
thing is, like, if you think about the technology as it exists, right?
Mm,
Technology that exists today,
hmm.
you could, like, operators say, oh, yeah, we got 30 days where you analyze what the player's playing like.
Hmm.
Actually, in conversation with Dr. Aaron, I think he did a paper on this, I'm not 100% sure, but you know straight away how a player is gambling. You don't need 30 days to assess that. If a player comes in with an existing issue, they will show it immediately. Now, with that in mind, people say, "Oh, nobody wants to set a limit. Nobody wants to do this, do that." Well, actually, if it's part of the sign-up process and it's checking a box, it's not as onerous as they make it sound. All of
I
those
think you
player
make a good
protection
point
things
here.
could be in the front end and working from sign-up, but they don't. They're
Well, I
not.
think what I say about this is you don't, like, no one likes going to see the doctor or the dentist. You don't want to make it too clinical. And also, a lot of the research that we've got is a lot of players say this isn't relevant to me and they find it a barrier, whatever. Now, I think limits was from the research was a very good way to help players, you know, timeout breaks, etc. Now, I think immediate, and I'm not an academic, so forgive me. I think immediate may be challenging, but I think you're right, it could be less than 30 days. But I think, you know, I'll put it this way. If you're an alcoholic and you go in a pub, is it immediate after one pint? You've got a problem. It'll be within half an hour to an hour, whatever. It can become. So I think it depends on your definition of immediate.
Let's just say less than 30 days. But
I don't disagree.
as part of a player's sign up, and I've suggested this to an operator in the past, as part of a player's sign up, you could have a gamified assessment in there that's not obviously an assessment,
Hmm.
and it will show you a little bit about how that player's mind works,
Hmm.
what kind of volatility they are likely to lean towards.
Hmm.
You could do it in all sorts of ways, but say you had some kind of a crash game as part of your sign up, but you have something that is worth winning to the player, and you also give them something that is worth losing, and see how they balance that risk, right? Nobody's doing this. That gives you an insight before they've even made a deposit.
Yeah, I'm gazing into an abyss, not because I don't agree with what you're saying. We have something similar called 1X Balance, which is kind of a gamified quiz, but it's not at sign up, which gives an indication of player preferences. Um,
It can give you an idea of their preferences
mhm.
and an idea of how they assess risk.
Yeah,
Because
that's kind of I'm
because
bringing the two together within
any
1X Balance.
gambler is going to be a risk taker, aren't they? I mean,
Hmm.
innately. Um, and that's
Well,
that's one
everyone
of
on
the
this
things that,
planet is a risk taker, to be fair, of
well,
lesser
as the
levels.
great Leslie Nielsen once said, you take a chance every time you cross the road, stick your face in a fan. Um,
Look, I mean, I think one of my modules of my master's was political risk analysis, and they started off the first going, tell us a risk you took. And unfortunately, five of us said we went to Timepiece nightclub last night, and this was at 9 a.m. and we had to be here. That was a risk.
Timepiece, was it in Exeter?
Yeah.
When were you at Exeter University, Simon?
2000 to
Wow.
2005.
I moved out of Exeter, would have been probably January 2000. I lived there, January, and then I moved to, but I actually ended up back in Exeter about, let me think. Probably about 5 years later. So I probably realistically missed you on both ends.
Which, looking back at my university antics, probably best for everyone.
Yeah, I was a little bit nuts at the time too.
I'm so glad there was no social media when I was at university.
You know where the old firehouse or the Black
Yes,
Horse pub, they were
the
quite close together.
Blackie used to have
Yeah.
Sunday sessions in the Blackie.
So the Black Horse pub used to back onto the office I worked in. I worked for a company called Rapide Publishing when I was in Exeter. And we used to go in the Black Horse through the back entrance.
We never did that. We used to,
That's because it's
was it
the
Danes
staff
Road,
entrance.
but just by behind the prison we used to live, and we used to cut through, and then we'd be at the Black Horse. I may be wrong on the name of the road, but the Black Horse I certainly remember.
Yeah. I think the landlord was a Chelsea supporter, if I remember correctly. Obviously a fine, upstanding gentleman. And I used to live up past the Bowling Green pub.
That was a very nice pub, the Bowling Green.
It was all right, yeah. Wasn't bad. Nice Sunday lunch.
I was normally sleeping. I'm like, oh.
Jesus. Lightweight. And support and well-being being the final pillar.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about. Those those directly affected, and it's about grants and partnerships for counselling and community programs.
Yeah, we've had, like I said, we've had some great people on the addiction podcast, but some people who are, not just focusing on the addiction, they're focusing on the affected others.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some really fascinating people with some really interesting life experience, shall we say, in forthcoming episodes.
Well, I think also you make a good point here, because actually, although this is, let's just say, performative compliance or swept under the carpet by the industry a little bit, I was talking to my friend about this in Rio, because I can't always keep my mouth shut, but luckily he was aware of the project that we were developing. He was like, Simon, this is such an interesting thing to be on, because it's not going to go away. It's going to become more and more important, and the industry can't ignore it forever. So if you're at the forefront of it, obviously 1XCARE can really become something really quite big in this space, at the forefront of the conversation. And it's really about sustainability and transparency and accountability, obviously.
Yes, I mean, I'm excited to see what you do with it, and I mean that sincerely, because so often I just see, like you say, performative. I see people just making the right noise because they've got boxes to tick, as opposed to somebody taking a chance on creating a player relationship where the player is actually looked after, where the right software is implemented at the right time, where a problem player might even be steered away from a high volatility game that
Mm-hmm.
might help to make them unwell because they've been assessed properly at the right time. All of these things exist now. All of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're all usable now, and they are all either underused or not used at all. Somebody you should definitely talk to are a couple of people. Do you know Simo Dragicevic? And he was working with Sarah Ramanauskas.
Mm-hmm.
And they've actually stopped what they were doing, unfortunately, because they couldn't get any traction. But what they were looking at was the idea that, so something we were talking about earlier on about commonalities in addiction. Well, gambling addiction especially is, in most instances, certainly that I've ever heard of, it's a symptom of another ill.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a very, very damaging one when it comes.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to tackle it with an holistic view. Like out in the real world, a multi-agency approach to it is essential. One of the main drivers for women with gambling problems, for example, is domestic abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you don't tackle the abuse, you are absolutely pissing in the wind with the gambling addiction. And so you've got to come at it with your eyes absolutely wide open. But it's damn it, I've lost my own thread there. What was I talking about? Do you remember?
No, you've got me. No, you have about these two
Sarah
academics
and Simo.
who could the holistic
They
multi-agency
were
approach.
looking at the environment of gambling harm,
Mm-hmm.
as in the whole environment, as in not just the game that's presented, but how it's presented and what they're playing it on, but also their immediate physical environment. And accepting that actually harm does not exist on its own. There can be umpteen small triggers creating one large one. And it's a really fascinating way to look at it.
That makes a lot of sense in a lot of, not just this arena, but I think, we were looking to go further with 1XCARE and not just tick boxes, but also look to build an ecosystem that's wider than just one aspect. Now, have I given myself and the team too much to do? Possibly. But this holistic multi-agency approach is something that goes through life in general, and it's something that has to be addressed. But I think, yeah, you're giving me. It's not very often I'm thinking as I'm talking. You've certainly given me a lot to think on at this point. But
And you
gold
can
star for you
definitely
today.
afford me. Where can people find information? Where does this have its own dedicated website?
Yeah, it's 1xcare.org is the dedicated
So
website.
number one, letter X, care,
Care.
CARE.
.org. Yeah. And there's a LinkedIn page as well. Yeah. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Those that have my number, reach out to me. And
anybody
I'm
that's
just trying to
listening
get
that
my
wants to be put in
1XCare
touch.
email all working today, to be fair to you. I've got it set up, it's just I'm not getting email. But LinkedIn at the moment is the easiest way to get me.
Yeah, anybody that's listening and knows me, I'm happy to make an introduction if you need it.
Yeah, happily.
And yeah, I totally know some people you should probably meet.
Happily, and I think that, as I said last week, and again, not trying to push on your sponsors, and while gaming is they're now known, this is launched. There's still processes that we're setting up, but I didn't want to lose time and not launch it till after the summer, September. So we've launched, we're in the very embryonic stage of launch, but we've got the advisory board, which we're going to add to. We've got the pillars and we've got the dedication to do this. So I had a number of meetings last week. I'm open to speak to everyone. The execution may take a little bit. It's not going to be instant right now, but we will get there.
Rocking. Yeah, we'll be very happy to welcome you back when you start some things rolling, because it's about time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of exciting things that we've got in the pipeline, which is just different. Does that make sense? And I can't say what they are, but they're looking at it slightly differently, and they excite me because it's working in partnership with some big organisations. It's not us dictating the roadmap. It's actually discussions. And actually, you mentioned this earlier about trade shows and conferences, etc., and the space. And again, I'm not going to mention the name, but there's one guy that we're working with in one of the event organisers, and this is a hint to others. He asks a very important question, which not many do. What are you looking to achieve? How can I help you achieve that? That's how he starts every meeting, rather than saying, spend this money with us. So,
well, no, it's. I mean, I was earlier on. I think I even made a note somewhere on this envelope, which was, what does success look like? But as we were talking, I realized it's a very abstract idea within what you're doing, success.
Well, I think also, as we've mentioned, due to perception or association, there's some people that will have a higher bar for success than others. And I've dedicated this, as you mentioned, announced it very publicly, and I'll put my name to it. I will work as I always do, 24/7, as much as I can to deliver. And I think the fact that it's a separate entity really does that give another level of transparency to it, because, as we said, there will be reports, as there are with every company, financial ones, and you can see what we're doing. But it's also never going to be enough for some people.
No, there is that. It's one of the things that, you know, I know operators that, well, there's a charity near me. It's completely funded by a gambling operator.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in a very rural area, and what it does is extremely important in terms of healthcare, and nobody knows about it, because if it came out, they'd just be accused of trying to sanitize their reputation, as opposed to doing something extraordinarily valuable in a community that's desperate for it. And that's one of the criticisms of the industry, isn't it?
But John, that's where I come back to this point very often. This is where, as an industry, we need to win the conversation with society again. Because when I first started in this industry 19 years ago, everyone thought it was cool and fun. Now, again, as you said earlier, you didn't use the word paradoxical, you used a far better word than me. Everyone just views it as instantly negative. And the fact is, even when you engage with regulators and we make valid arguments as an industry, people think we're just making up things to protect our revenues. And actually, that's not good for the industry if everyone just views us as intrinsically bad.
I have a theory about this, and I'm writing an article about it later this week, about how gambling has an image problem, which may shock some people, but it's true. But how change needs to be done generationally, not just by spunking money on things. I've got a plan.
Yeah, a plan's always good, but was it you have a plan until you get punched in the face? But no, I think that the concept and the idea of what you're saying is, I think, yeah, it's just so obvious to me that I can't believe that anyone would ever question what you're saying. We have an image problem, and it's a challenge that we need to address, and we need to be committed to that, because otherwise you're just going to be seen as, you see regulation, which isn't really regulation these days. It's just, oh, we're going to increase taxes because we need money. And I'm not just talking about the UK, I'm talking about many jurisdictions. But when we actually give a juxtaposing argument or suggestion that might say, actually, that might not work, it's never accepted. And I think other industries be it tobacco or alcohol, have worked very hard on their image and are far more accepted.
It was a rocky road getting there, though, for them. But look out for my article. It's a winner.
Yeah, it'll be on LinkedIn, I'm assuming. As long as it's on LinkedIn, I'll see it.
Yeah, it'll be on IGB, I think, and I'll be spreading it far and wide.
Okay.
Simon Westbury, chair of 1XCARE. Thanks for joining us. It's been great.
Well, it's a pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Gambling Files podcast, please find us on LinkedIn. Give us a big, juicy, succulent like. That nearly went wrong. You can find us under the name The Gambling Files Podcast. You can find us on Twitter under The Gambling Files. I think the handle is just @GamblingFiles. You can connect to myself, John Bruford, or Fintan Costello, also on LinkedIn. We're also both on Twitter. And you can find all of our previous episodes at www.thegamblingfiles.com. If you enjoyed it, please share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your colleagues, and we'll see you next time.